Hey folks, welcome to Narratives. Narratives is a podcast exploring the ways in which the world is better than in the past, the ways it is worse, and the paths towards a better, more definite vision of the future. I'm your host, Will Jarvis, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. You can find show notes, transcripts, and videos at narrativespodcast.com. Cam, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm great. This is rad. This is a cool setup.
It's cool. Thank you.
First, I haven't been to the Commons before, and then two,
it's pretty cool.
Recording a podcast in this fashion is fantastic.
Yes,
I'm all about it.
IRL, I love it. Well, Cam, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show. Do you mind giving us a brief bio and some of the big ideas you're interested in?
Yeah. So my name's Cam Wiese, and bios are always interesting. I'm so just obsessed with this one single idea, this one single project, which is the revival and the reimagining of the World's Fair. And we used to host these grand events that captured the nation or captured the world's imagination through story and experience, and we haven't had a great one since '64, and I think it's a shame. And we need, as a culture, to regain this sort of hope for the future and remember kind of the sort of great things we're capable of in a World's Fair. Might just demonstrate that.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about the history of the World's Fair, what it is, what it was, and why it went away, or do you have any sense of why it went away?
Yeah, the why it went away is the most kind of interesting question, because you still have these events known as the World Expo. Actually, before I go into the history, let me start with kind of what the World's Fair is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people aren't familiar. You have the World's Cup, and you have the Olympics, which are mega events that people know today. And the World's Fair is a type of mega event.
Yeah.
It's a physical event, ran for often 6+ months on hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of land.
Gotcha.
And served as a way to kind of showcase the latest and greatest in technology and innovation ideas.
Very cool.
And they were, and some of them were used as economic development engines for cities like Spokane, Washington, New Orleans, San Antonio, right? But there's this class of fairs that I consider the great fairs.
Yeah.
So you have the ones that really were focused not on economic development, but on the revitalization and kind of the sort of vision for something bigger for a specific city.
Gotcha.
Particularly, 1915 here in San Francisco was built as a way to kind of get the city back up and running after the Great Fire.
Gotcha.
In Chicago in 1933, you had Century of Progress Exposition, which was kind of this light amidst the darkness of the Great Depression. And I can go on and on, but we had these events, and they ran really again up until the 60s, and there were some in the 70s, some in the 80s. The last one in the U.S. was in 1984, and a lot of people ask, what happened to these? Why don't we run these anymore?
Yeah.
And they're really kind of three things. One is the competition from Disney's Epcot.
Gotcha.
So Epcot opened in '82, and it was designed. Well, originally it was designed to be a city, which is a whole other topic I'm happy to riff on. But the one that they ended up kind of creating was intended to be a permanent World's Fair. You had the country showcase, and you had the pavilions, and that was kind of the thing that people went to if they wanted to go see the future.
Yep.
But you also had the kind of contrasting economic development engine, mega events with the Olympics and the World's Fair.
Gotcha.
In '84.
Got it.
So you had Peter Ueberroth, who ran the Olympics in Los Angeles. He kind of came in and you want me to go into this?
Yeah.
Okay. I could, if you can pull me out if you want.
Okay.
I'm happy to. You had Peter Ueberroth, who was hired to run the Los Angeles Olympics Committee. Yeah. And at the time, everyone was like, the Olympics are done.
Yeah.
Right? The previous ones hadn't done well. There were a bunch of national conflicts. And what Peter Ueberroth did, being a savvy businessman rather than a politician or a bureaucrat, came in and said, this thing just needs a new business model.
Yeah.
So instead of, trying to get the city to pay for it, they had it entirely privately funded. Yeah. And they did it by selling the broadcasting rights of the Olympics to, I believe it was ABC for I'll need to fact check this, but it was $200-300 million.
Gotcha.
And that made the Los Angeles Olympics the most profitable Olympics in history.
Right.
And all that money has continued to fund Los Angeles sports programming for the last 50 years.
Right.
And cities saw that and they're like, whoa, the Olympics.
Yeah.
We want an Olympics.
Exactly.
Because they also had the contrast of the '84 World's Fair in New Orleans.
Right.
That ended in bankruptcy. There was a lien on the event halfway through. There's some organized crime, corruption. It was very, very sketchy sort of set of circumstances. And then you didn't have good marketing back then, so people heard
Right.
oh, this thing isn't going. I'm not gonna go.
Yeah.
So they ended up not hitting their numbers, which
Gotcha.
were also based on faulty, fraudulent data, and then the kind of World's Fair there kind of fell off. It was Olympics over the fairs, and then the last piece is just there's a lot of talk in at least the tech circles around kind of stagnation and progress and what the fuck happened in 1971 sort of thing. And so you had this cultural malaise that I think is an interesting layer on top. And with all the innovation and all the developments of new technologies being funneled into the world of software,
Right.
There wasn't a lot to showcase
Right.
at the fairs, or at least there would have been, but it required a little bit more imagination because it wasn't as easy as saying hey, Henry Ford, why don't you bring the Model T and set up an assembly line?
Right.
Or there are countless other examples, but there wasn't as much concrete stuff to show off.
Right.
And so it just was a harder lift for people, especially people in cities who weren't on the frontier of technology, if you will.
Right. That makes sense. I'm curious, what does it take to make one of these events successful today? You mentioned broadcasting rights powering, the LA Olympics and that leading to a lot of success. It seems like a real challenge today in that how do you create something that is self-funding in some sense, that is a mega event? Most Olympics now, it seems like they barely make any money or they lose a lot of money, especially for the cities that put them together. How do you think about making these kind of events kind of successful?
Yeah, I think the Olympics serve as a really good example for this sort of this problem, right? Because people don't think mega events can be profitable. They don't think they can be run, efficiently.
Right.
And part of the problem though is that just to kind of sidestep into a quick tangent on the Olympic Games, the way the Olympics is set up is you have the International Olympic Committee, which manages all of the they're the ones after LA was successful in '84.
Yeah.
They're you know what, we actually want that money.
Gotcha.
Right? Los Angeles got in '84, but no other Olympics did because the IOC was
Right.
ooh, we want this.
Right.
So all the sponsorships, all the broadcasting rights flow up to the IOC. And then the IOC then has a bidding process for cities, and the way they dole out the bids is pretty much based on who gives them the most money, who puts on the most extravagant show, and the incentives are really skewed because the IOC has no vested interest in the continued success of the infrastructure that's put in place for the Olympics. It's who's going to spend the most? We don't care what you're going to do with it after.
Right.
Exactly. Yada yada. We want to put on a good games.
Yeah.
And I think there's things that we can draw on from the way the problems of the Olympics to think about how we would do a World's Fair today.
Yeah.
Would you not want to start with the city? Because if you start with the city, you're immediately pigeonholed to the politics and the budgets.
Right.
And if you take any money from any tax collecting entity, then it quickly becomes political and bureaucratic and
right.
it doesn't get off the ground.
Exactly.
And we've seen this. There have been several attempts since '84 to do a World's Fair.
Right.
And they've all fallen victim to the same issue. The other is how do we have a legacy plan in place for the site after the fair is hosted?
Gotcha.
So there's some cool opportunities. There's a lot of this new cities movement that's taking place, and there's a possibility. How might we use a World's Fair to subsidize the economic or streamline the economic development of one of these new city projects? Or how do we do something with land taxes?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Which we can get into. And then obviously we have the internet.
Yeah.
Right. We have this incredible, means of distribution and communication that really could unlock all sorts of new opportunities on both the media and the kind of virtual fronts for something like the fair. And so you pair the land, you pair the sort of there's also this other component of this, which is how do you actually just run the event like a business,
right? Not
like a economic development project.
Yes.
And if you do that, you sell the pavilion spaces to companies and they pay for it.
Yes.
You sell tickets. You kind of do all the standard things. But if you look at this isn't the best comparison, but you compare this like Disneyland, Disney World, like
Yes.
they're exceptionally profitable like
Yep.
endeavors,
Right.
And like, it can be done.
Yes.
Tens of millions of people go every year.
Right.
And I think like you could do something similar for the fair. It just requires like new innovative thinking on the business model.
Yes. Makes sense. You just gotta be a little bit more creative, and there are some good ways.
Yeah,
to
like in like there's no playbook for this, right? Like
Right.
actually there is. There's an old planning guide from one of the past fairs that kind of outlines the process for
Yeah.
how they funded, how they developed it, and it's like really fascinating because
Right.
it's a very similar time to the one
Yep.
we're in right now,
Definitely.
economically, culturally, like
Yep.
geopolitically, and like this is what we did, this is what worked,
Right.
and like they set up some principles that I think would be fair organizers, of which
Right.
there don't appear to be any other than me.
Yeah.
Would benefit from learning from.
That's great. What do you think it would cost to set up like a modern World's Fair equivalent?
I mean, depends on like which costs you want to factor in.
Yeah.
Right. If we're talking total cost of development of like land acquisition, taking a greenfield site and like converting it into something
Right.
usable, roads, water,
Yep.
infrastructure, all the buildings, like the total like money in is probably I would compare it to Disneyland Shanghai, which was about a
Gotcha.
$6 billion project.
Gotcha.
But obviously like that is not all like cost.
Right.
Or it's not all like money being sunk into a pit. Right.
Yes,
You
yes.
have the development of the land. You have
Right.
some of the buildings that have
Yeah.
permanent infrastructure, etc. So I don't know. That's kind of what I based on. But like this is a big project.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
obviously I'd like I would like to find someone who has done
Right.
big projects like this to
Yes.
build out the financial models. But yeah, it's not a
Right.
100K, do it in the
Definitely.
Golden Gate Park sort of thing.
Exactly. How do you think about bootstrapping something like this from nothing into like a actual World's Fair?
This is the question,
Yeah.
right? Because the vision's great. End of the decade, like we'll like open the gates, but how do you actually get the resource you need to like start and
Yes.
then kind of iterate? Like iterate's not the right term. Like MVP isn't the right frame to think
Yes.
about this either. It's like how do we just? It's more about how do you build a team that can demonstrate like capacity.
Right.
It's not about like is this thing possible to do.
Yeah.
Like it's very
Very
it's not
possible.
a hard thing to. We build real estate projects. We build theme parks. We operate these things. Like
Exactly.
you have people who creatively tell stories through physical spaces and
Yeah.
through films. Like there's nothing new about like
Right.
any of this.
Yeah.
The challenge is like you have to pair the like the fund. You have to find the funders.
Yes.
Right. Find the people who have who like want to see this sort of thing exist in the world.
Right.
And who are willing to be like what, like let's take like milestone based bets
Yes.
to like see this thing developed. And so the way I think about it is like, again, in line with demonstrating capacity, it's like, okay, we have this big thing that we want to do.
Right.
Right. So what is like, actually like the thread here, the through line is actually slightly different. It's like the thing that, jumping back to the beginning, the thing that made some of those, I mentioned, like there's certain fairs that were really great.
Yes.
And the thing that made them great was not their size, not their location, not the things that they showed off
Right.
necessarily, but they were all focused on creating a feeling for people.
Gotcha.
It was this feeling of hope and wonder and awe.
Makes
Right.
sense.
And so that is the thing that separates like the fairs that people remember nostalgically
Yes.
and the ones that like people like don't know about.
Right.
And so when I think about this and how we break it down,
Yes.
it's like ultimately like at the end of the day, like the fair is just like an anchor,
Yes.
right? The big mega event is an anchor
Right.
that is communicating and expressing like celebrating this feeling or giving people this feeling
Yes.
at the largest possible scale.
Right.
And so to get there, we just have to take that feeling and figure out how do we deliver that in like ways today
Yeah.
and then next month and next year that both like captures that feeling for people.
Right.
And kind of develops the capacity of the team to like go execute on larger and larger creative projects. Because like
Definitely.
the last thing on this is like, again, all this is doable, but like it requires a team that has like
Yes.
trust with each other,
Right.
and have good relationships and like
Right.
can like work well. And you don't go run a $5+ billion infrastructure project with like a team that hasn't like worked together before.
Exactly.
So it's like,
exactly.
how do you like? But what are the different jumps you have to
Right.
take? So
Exactly. Exactly. And
it's a complicated thing.
absolutely. And what's the kind of smallest wedge you're starting with in the beginning?
So the really the way that we've broken the fair down, like the grand event, is
Yeah.
based on this framework of hope. And again, it's an academic framework,
Yes.
but I think it's useful to think about. Like you have, in order to have hope, you have to have three things. You have to have goals.
Yeah.
What's the top of the mountain? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
You have to have pathways. How do we go from where we are today up the mountain to reach that goal?
Yeah.
And three, you have to have agency. It's like, do you believe that you have the agency to take the pathway to reach the goal? Right. And so when we're thinking about like what does the like end of the decade fair look like, it's based on that sort of thing. So we have the pavilions and these realms that some folks, like we did a poster campaign that we released like art that represents each of these core themes, and those represent the work being done today to build the world of tomorrow. But then but that's only the pathways piece, right? And then we want to give people that hope. So what we're doing is designing this like immersive, like the set of immersive worlds.
Gotcha.
They're set in this fictional, aspirational future where all the technology that people saw at the fair are like played out,
Very cool.
30 to 40 years into the future to see like, oh, here's how amazing and how vibrant and beautiful our world could be as a result of these technologies. These things are not going to destroy humanity. They're not going to like, they're going to change things, but like ultimately just like every other sort of like all the other progress in the past, like the world is ultimately going to be better as a result. And so what we want to do is take one of those worlds and develop kind of an immersive activation that I want to open 18 to 24 months from now. It's November 2022. So I did like 18 to 24 months, and this will like give guests 100,000 people or so over the course of a few weeks or a few months the opportunity to step into this world and experience what life could be like in that world.
Very cool.
But then obviously like that's still a big piece, so we're working on how do we design like a pavilion concept that will like show people some of the pathways through an immersive experience in the next year or so. And then we're also working on kind of cooking up a couple things on the media front, the experience front, to just again demonstrate capacity like on the day-to-day so that we can stack up to doing like a larger event and then a larger experience and then a larger experience and then go from there.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
How did you come to the World's Fair originally?
I'm from Seattle. Yeah. And I remember like we moved around a lot as kids, like because my dad was doing the kind of corporate thing. Yeah. But we'd always fly back to visit my grandparents. Yeah. And I always remember flying into Seattle Airport, getting in the car, and it was often raining in the Pacific Northwest as it does. Yeah. And driving up I-5. Yeah. And looking out the window and seeing the Space Needle. Yeah. And it just like to me it was the coolest piece of architecture I'd ever seen. I'm like, wow, like what, like, and as a kid, I didn't know what that was, but it was like it was a really cool symbol. Exactly. And I'm like, I like this. Yeah. And so as I grew up and I realized, I'm like, oh wait, like what was this? And I started asking questions like, what was this for? Right. Like we built this, like why? Oh, this is for a World's Fair. Yeah. Oh, what are the World's Fairs, etc. And so it was like always in the back of my mind. Yeah. But the kind of inception point was probably 2 years ago at this point. Just like the idea inception point was like sitting in the airport with one of my friends. We were talking about how all the science fiction in our world today is very a lot of it is very dystopian. Yes. Right. The popular science fiction, the movies are painting a vision for the future that's not exciting or not compelling. Right. They make for good movies. Yes. But they don't accurately represent the sort of world I think we all want to live in. Yeah. And so I kind of got up in my soapbox as I often do. Yeah. And found myself just on this rave where I'm like, why are all of these movies dystopian? Yeah, exactly. This is ridiculous. Yeah. What if we got all these science fiction authors in one room and we made them design the coolest possible future? What would that book look like? What would that movie look like? Wait, what if we turn that thing into a place that you could actually go? Yeah. You could step into this world and you could see how awesome things could be. Like, definitely. What would that look like? Wait a minute. Didn't we do this? Wasn't this like the World's Fairs? Like, what was this? And then like, it was that sort of moment where I'm like, oh, World's Fairs. Right. What happened to those? And put it off for a while, but have become kind of an amateur, World's Fair historian. Yes. And realize like again, like these events serve a huge purpose in like getting people excited about the future, especially during really dark and depressing times. Yeah. And it just seems to me to be like so blatantly obvious that like the thing we need now culturally is this hope for the future, as I've said. Right. And like we've done this before. Like this seems to be a pretty obvious path. Like move forward. Right. And no one was working on it. Like this needs to be done. Yeah. So here we are.
I love it. I love it. Do you think something like this is enough to put defibrillator paddles on the West, so to speak, and get things back on the?
That's morbid.
Like,
Yeah.
And I do love that. I do love the effort. Like I think it's a really good idea. Do you think it's enough on its own, or is there some other key piece that needs to happen as well to kind of, restart progress?
It's a great question. I certainly don't think it's like the only thing. I think like really it's going to take kind of a more of a cultural movement.
Yeah.
Right. That I'm hoping to just like play. And like with the fair, I'm just hoping to play like a small part of that. But more broadly, we definitely need more stories being told about the future that are exciting.
Right.
We need more people choosing to build rather than to like
definitely
petition.
Yes.
I need to think of a more catchy way to say that,
Exactly.
but it's just like there's far too much like, oh, everything's broken. Oh, I'm so frustrated with the system.
Right.
The status quo, like the system's not working for us. Like we live in the most incredible time.
Yes.
Like nobody in their right mind would even consider jumping into a time machine and going back, 100 years. Like the world was not great back then.
Yeah.
Right. And like today, you have all this technology, you have all this infrastructure, you have all these like the world's great for everybody. Like in comparison to what it was, and like we needed. I lost my thread. Okay. Is this sufficient? It's okay. The fair is necessary, not sufficient. Broader cultural movement. Like. It's like there's just like a lot of things that we need to do, like as a culture to like really appreciate like where we're at now and where we're going. And again, the fair is like a piece of that. But again, like we need more. So I think this is the piece. We need people to like not complain and to go build, like go be entrepreneurs, go start, like go solve problems, like go do the hard work of figuring out like what is not working. Whether it's like, I mean, it can be software, but a lot of the stuff that needs work is like not
physical
glorious.
things.
It's not sexy. It's like go run for like local politics. Right? Like that is an extremely high point of leverage for like actually affecting positive change. Yeah. And like very few people are taking that that idea seriously. Like as I was telling you before, like I think one of my takes is that like the most courageous thing you can do now, like in the world today, is to go into politics, go into the machine, and like you may get eaten alive by it. Yeah. But if you don't, like you may just be able to like do something important. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially at the state and local government level, I think it's a very high leverage point to do a lot of good today. Just in comparison to, I think it's much less competitive. There's a lot of so you can have a much, if you're a talented person, the delta between you and the next person who would be in that spot is often much higher.
Yeah, and I think like as we were talking offline, like people now have the tools and the resources to go do this. Like if you're not in one of the major cities, like you could still like probably can work remote. Yeah. Right. You have obviously means and like to your point, the delta between like you and the next person is probably like pretty large. Yes. Like if you just choose to to be courageous and to step up and take responsibility for like building something great in your local community, like you can and like you should. Actually, not you should. You must. Yes. Right? If you have the capacity to do these things, like you have almost a moral imperative to do them because like if not you, then who? Right. And it's like this is sort of the attitude, like culturally, that I think that I believe is necessary. It's like how do we get more people broadly being like, you know what? I'm gonna go do something about this. Whether it's okay, there's a kind of tangent here.
Yes, absolutely.
This is kind of related, but I think it's a hilarious example. It's like you have over in Oakland, there's like thousands of potholes that like need to be filled. Yes. And everyone is complaining about how shitty it is to drive over there, and it's like it's not fun. Yeah. And they've gone to the city and like, hey, can you please do something about this? Can you please fix this? Yeah. And the city, of course, like oh, it's a backlog. We'll get to it. I'm like, we're tired of this. So you have this vigilante group of citizens who rented a box truck and a cement mixer, and they're literally going around pouring like concrete or asphalt into these potholes to fix them because the city won't. Yeah. And there's this clip, I don't know, it was on the news or probably made its way around Twitter or somewhere on the internet where it's like some interview where like they're all masked up. They're like, no one's showing their faces. Like, it's not about us. It's about the movement. Yeah. And it's like, that's a phenomenal example of people who saw a problem, and like this needs to be fixed. No one else is going to come do this. Like
Yes.
we have to take responsibility for it. And
Right.
then just like it's that sort of granular, like local level, like
Yeah.
in your neighborhood, on your block, like pick up the trash after yourself. Like
Right.
don't like no one else is going to do it, right? No one's going to pick up your
Yeah.
trash. No one's going to go like, clean up your city. No one's
Exactly.
going to go, solve the problem you care most about in the world. Like you have to
Right.
do it. You have to do it.
I love that message. I think it's really important. Do you think there's something perhaps like in our culture where we've gotten, perhaps American elites or something have gotten quite wealthy. They're doing better than they ever have before in economic terms, and things are pretty comfortable. And so there's like just less incentive to go out and solve the problems. Maybe you move to your gated community. You move up here to the nice place in Hayes Valley, and the problems don't come up the hill or something like that.
Yeah.
So you don't worry about it.
I definitely think there's something to that. I mean, Ross
Doubt it.
Dawson, with his the Decadent Society. I think this is
Yeah.
his thesis, isn't it? It's like, have you read
Yeah.
his book? Yeah, I think this is his point. It's like everyone just gets comfortable,
Yeah.
and then people with the means, with the capital, like they can like isolate themselves from the problems. Like,
Yeah.
oh, cool, you were about crime. Like, well, I'm just I have money, so I'm gonna go hire private security.
Right.
Oh, I'm just gonna move, and it's like,
Yeah.
this, yeah, I definitely think there's something to
Yeah.
that, but the people who are in those positions, like they're no longer like they're not the ones who are on the ground doing the building. Yeah,
Yeah.
they have some swayed influence
Right.
politically and maybe perhaps culturally, but at the end of the day, like that doesn't change the sort of circumstances for like you and I and all of our friends and people
Right.
who are like just starting out in their careers, like don't like are just able
Yeah.
to be scrappy to be like, hey,
Exactly.
like they're the ones who can go solve these problems. Like
Yeah.
kind of passing it up or like delegating the sort of responsibility to like those who have like money or power or influence
Yeah.
is almost a cop out.
Right.
Like, yes, it's a problem, but that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
a lot of us can't do anything about it.
Gotcha. Makes sense. It makes sense.
I don't know. What do you think? Can I ask you questions on this podcast?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can't. I do think there's something weird with the capable people. This weird thing happened where, so one of my old friends, we were to start up together. He, his grandfather did the SAT, and this is a really good thing. We selected up all the smart people from all the rural places and put them in university, and then we agglomerate them together, and you get all these economic gains. But then it pulls all the talent out of like all the rural places, and then there's just these societies start to break down, and we wonder what's going on. And I don't know. I think there's something about elite responsibility, and perhaps by elite I mean cultural elites.
Yeah, totally.
And not necessarily like I do think this is separate from income, like completely, and wealth. These are two completely different vectors.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then like even like the cultural, it's like the value system that they're propagating is not one that's like really beneficial for anyone but themselves.
Yes.
I think it's like, and then everyone's detached from the consequences. Like
Right.
if you're like on the coast, you're like, oh yeah, this policy is a great idea. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, you have no like
No concept of what's going on.
you have no concept of what's going on. The consequences of like this policy, this behavior, like don't actually affect you.
Yes.
But you like are up in your high tower, if you
Yep.
will, like up on your hill and
Yeah, exactly.
what's the hill in San Francisco? Why am I blanking on this? Like you're up on like you're up in Pack Heights, like
Yeah, exactly.
up on your tower, and you're like, oh yeah, we should do this.
Yep.
And like it never seeps up to you.
Right.
And so like you can virtue signal and you can grandstand and you
Yeah.
can kind of talk about these things and feel kind of virtuous about it. But like at the end of the day, like we need to there needs to be some sort of thing to like actually get people like the elites need to stop like meddling in like the everyday people problems and like
Right.
think about themselves less as like the gatekeepers or the like hey, I know it's best for everybody.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I'm delving too far out of my like
Right.
area of expertise, but yeah.
Because it's interesting. I'm curious. Do you ever worry at all that you put it together with the World's Fair and there's just not enough good technology to showcase or something like that?
No.
No, you think it'll be there?
I think
It's
it'll
funny.
be there. I mean, because it's not. I think a lot of people think about like the World's Fair or something. It's like there's just misperception. It's like, oh, is this like CES? It's like there's gonna be a bunch of booths. It's like no. Like there's no booths.
Right.
It's giant pavilions, but the pavilions are not like showcasing like one individual technology.
Yeah.
They're focused on telling the stories of these technologies, and
Right.
this is the fundamental difference. Is like nobody cares about like boom supersonic jet
Yeah.
or the tunnels or the Tesla.
Right.
They care about like what it does for them and
Right.
their lives and their families.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about gene editing except for when it's like, hey, this can cure you of this like incurable disease,
Exactly.
or this can help your loved one, like or your child who is sick from like leukemia, like get better. Like
Right.
this is like, these things don't matter in the abstract, and this is what people don't understand. It's like,
Yeah.
it's the technology is cool, yeah, you can watch it on YouTube, but like the story isn't there. Like, how does this connect? How does this resonate? How does this like change your life
Right.
for the better?
Yeah.
And like this is part of the adversarial relationship with like technology and, you know, like the rest of the world, at least. Well, now we know it's partially a result of, you know, Salzberger, you know, telling all of his journalists to
Yeah.
not report positively on technology.
Exactly.
And we'll see how that changes the narrative. But like you just like, you can't just put a thing out there and be like, oh, hey, look, this is great. Like,
Right.
you all should want this.
Exactly.
Like, you have to do what Steve Jobs did, where it's like, hey, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we're doing this thing now, and like,
Right,
this is how the
exactly.
world's going to
Yeah.
change. Like, you know, and Elon with like, hey, this is going to convert the world to electric cars.
Right.
And like, I mean, it's unfortunate, like, those are the two like most prominent examples that everyone can
Right.
connect with. Like, those are the role models that
Yeah.
people have, is for like how you go build the future.
Exactly.
And I think like that's a different kind of vector of change. I think is necessary, like making role models more accessible. But
Right.
the point is that like the individual technology, like so much positive stuff happening in the world right now. Like there's
Right.
so many great people working on solving like our toughest problems.
Right.
And you know, we may have to tell like the story of the future of flight, maybe a bit more like abstract, or
Right.
but like a thing like, you know, the future of energy. Like, I don't know, there's like a lot of room to play.
Right.
Especially when we think about this from like we're gonna tell stories about the various technologies based on what's being done today,
Right.
rather than like, okay, what companies are like commercially on the market? What are public companies? There's like all this work being done in research labs
Yeah.
and DARPA, like in private institutions that like
Yeah.
are very, very, very well funded and run
Yeah.
by very competent people, especially
Right.
like the private institutions that are now kind of starting to emerge. Like, there's lots of stuff that's gonna be coming out of those places too. So I'm not too worried about it.
Very cool. Very cool. So as we come up to the end of the episode here, I want to ask you, what can you go over like what's your biggest challenge right now? Is there anything the audience can do to fix it? And then let's talk about like the next 10 years and what you plan to accomplish.
Amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, really the biggest constraint right now is capital.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a very clear vision, kind of a good breakdown plan of like, hey, how
Right.
do we go about doing this? But it's finding the right people who are values aligned,
Yeah.
who are very pro-human, pro-progress, pro-like abundance, to
Yes.
say, you know what, like, yeah, World's Fair, like, this would be a great thing. Like, let's
Right.
go work towards it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, you know, both capital and like founding team.
Gotcha.
Right? It's also like, this is going to take more than just,
Right.
you know, a couple people over Zoom. It's like, how do we
Yeah.
build kind of a coalition of people that like truly believe that the
Exactly.
future can be better than the future can be better than the present, and then like
Right.
want to take the World's Fair as a vehicle
Definitely.
through which like I could go help manifest that.
Absolutely.
And then let's see. And then yeah, so I mean, it's capital, and then like obviously
Yeah.
team. Like again,
Definitely.
I need a lot. Like, I'm under no delusion that this is a massive project,
Right.
and like requires lots of help. So
Yes.
you know, if anyone is listening and they're excited about like the fair, you know,
Absolutely.
maybe if you got laid off from, you know, your startup or
Yeah.
whatever, not Meta, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, oof. You know, come chat. We're gonna, and then, you know, we're gonna be doing like events here in San Francisco to start
cool.
to like capture the feeling of the future and the
Yeah.
feeling of the fair.
Absolutely.
And so that's a really good way to kind of get involved and start to see like, oh, this thing is, there's some promise here. Then
Definitely.
let's scale up.
That's great. That's great. Well, Cam, where can people find you? Where should we send them?
So I'm on Twitter at Cam Wiese, so CamWiese. It's ICUC Wiese, although I feel like Weiss. And then, you know, follow the World's Fair at World's Fair Co. on Twitter, and then the website worldsfair.co. We have a mailing list, and, you know, we're spinning up more of the content arm, but you know, if you're a content creator and you care about the future, like,
Good place
hit
to
me
be.
up. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the where we're at
Awesome.
right now.
Good deal. Good. Awesome. Well, Cam, thanks so much for taking the time to come on.
Well, I
It's been fun.
appreciate you, man. Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks.
Take care.
Cool.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Narratives.